Hey everybody, on our podcast coming up today, you'll notice that the sound quality isn't quite what we want it to be. Unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties. It gets better towards the second half, so you might just be tempted to go to the second half, but I implore you not to do that. This guy is so interesting to us. We think you're going to love him. He's just a really talented, interesting guy, and and also this episode, while me and Rob never recommend anybody go to our YouTube to watch the episodes, for for the obvious reasons. This one, I would, I recommend that you do watch this one on YouTube because the guy is woodworking and is. I just think it really makes for a good episode if you do that. And finally, you'll notice towards the end of the podcast, I hardly talked at all, which it seems odd because I'm sitting right next to the guy. But what we recognize is if I didn't talk, his sound quality was better. So there you go. I really hope you listen to the episode. We really want to support this guy, and he was very cool. So please stay tuned. Hello, and welcome to another episode of On the Floor with Wayne and Rob. I'm Wayne Highlander, National Sales Manager for Bona Adhesives.
And I'm Rob Johnson from Bona Training.
How we doing, Rob?
I'm doing really good today.
Good, yeah.
How about yourself?
I'm doing well. I'm so excited about our show today, Rob. We have a guest with us today. And, usually we have a hardwood floor, a contractor or someone on the show. But today we have a woodworker. And all hardwood floor guys are woodworkers at heart, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So,
and I put on my share of wood floor.
And this gentleman has done some floors, as a matter of fact. And
That's what I want to talk about. I want to hear about his floors.
Yeah. So I'm going to introduce our guest today. His name is George Wurtzel, and he's a very skilled woodworker, and he does a great variety of woodworking projects. He does millwork, cabinets, furniture, and more. And done did some work for a famous R&B singer. We'll talk about that a little bit. And he does very complex. I'm in his shop, by the way, today, and I'm just like a little kid in a candy store. He has very complex projects that he works on and precise pieces. So maybe you can just introduce yourself a little bit, George, to the guests.
George Wurtzel, living the good life in Greenville, Tennessee. Native of Michigan, grew up in Michigan, worked in Michigan, and then spent some time in North Carolina in the furniture business, and spent some time in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where it's good and cold, and then spent a little bit of time outside of Napa, California, working up in the mountains there, and then decided to retire, and this is my retirement job.
So we're going to talk about his career, and I mentioned that I'm in his shop now, and I invite everybody to go to his. We'll talk about your contact information later, but I mentioned that about his woodworking, and it's just some phenomenal, really nice stuff. And George is blind, and I believe since the 20s.
I started off with really, really bad eyes, and by the time I was in my 20s, it was all gone.
It was all gone.
Yeah.
I'm amazed at some of your work, and you also had a fascinating life. I did some research on you, George. So again, I'd like invite our listeners to check out his work. So as I said, and I want to talk about this later because I think it's so cool. You for our listening audience, you may have seen George already. He was in a famous commercial that we'll talk about later.
No, I want to talk about that now. I got to get that out.
You want to get that out of the way? Okay.
Yeah. Come on, man. George, was that a Super Bowl commercial?
It started running on the Super Bowl. I mean, if you're gonna do a national ad, you got to start it on the Super Bowl.
That's what as soon as I was reading it, I said, geez, I remember that commercial. That was the Super Bowl commercial.
And then, and I always tell people, if you're going to be in a national ad of some sort, and you want to move to a new town, it's the perfect time to do it. When I moved to Greenville, it's a small town. It's only 15,000 people, so it's a little place. And I moved to town, and the ad was running. So they did a little ditty in the newspaper about me moving in, and they mentioned the ad. So then everybody in town knew who I was. I didn't have to even introduce myself. I mean, it was great. You go into places and they go, "Oh yeah, you're the Subaru guy." I mean, it was so cool. I mean, and it was, I've never done anything like that before. I've done some documentary film work with some people on a couple different projects. But if you would have told me that you could be in a single national ad of some sort and go anywhere in the United States and walk into, you know, a restaurant or a store or walk through an airport and people come up to you and say, "Are you the guy in the Subaru?" I would have told you were crazy. Nobody pays attention to who's in ads, you know. And I do admit I'm a rather unique looking individual, you know. But in the ad, I'm wearing bib overalls and a flannel shirt, and today I'm wearing bib overalls and just a t-shirt. But so it was my normal attire. So the same thing I've been wearing for the last, you know, 30 years of my life. And I'm a, you know, a shaggy hippie kind of looking, old hippie kind of guy. So, you know, it was what they were looking for the ad. The description for the call that went out to the agencies said they were looking for a blind gentleman between the ages of 55 and 75, somewhat curmudgeonly and rustic. And I fit all of those categories.
Check off all the boxes.
I
Huh?
did. And
Wow.
they called me, because I don't have an agent. I don't know anything about the business. But when they started looking for blind people, you know, there's not a lot of blind people who had agents, but most of them that they talked to knew who I was. They said, "That's the guy you need if you're looking for, you know, rustic." You know, so that's how I got the job.
So that's the look. That's your look, rustic.
Rustic, yeah.
Yeah. Because
And
when you
I
said
could
you're
go-
wearing the same clothes, I was thinking a couple weeks ago, I was just talking to my kids, and I grew up in the, I went to school in high school in the 70s, graduated in 1980. And I said, I'm actually wearing the same exact clothes now that I was then. Flannel shirt, work boots, and jeans. So I guess it's rustic, but when a look works for you,
Yeah.
you stay with it. I
Roll
mean,
with it.
look, you know, it got me this great podcast. I haven't done any Super Bowl commercials yet, but
Yeah,
I guess I just don't have the right agent.
there you go. Stick with it.
Yeah.
All right. So
Maybe you could talk to your guy, have my people,
you
your
go.
people talk to my people.
I'll do it.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to talk about your woodworking, but the first thing that when I met you here just a few minutes ago, you were showing me some of the things you were working on downstairs in your shop, and it's interesting to me that you were working on bending wood. You were putting down like templates or gussets, whatever, so you can bend the wood around.
They're building Bilbo, the door for Bilbo Baggins' house. And Bilbo needs a new front door. And Bilbo's new front door is 7 foot in diameter and is round. So it'll be, you know, 7 foot in diameter. And then we're gonna truncate or chop off the bottom 4 inches, which will give you a 34-inch threshold, which you need to have, and will still give you your 6/8 clearance. So if you're building a round door, you have to have a round jamb. And in my past lives, I have built a bunch of arch top windows and different things. So I absolutely know how to build, you know, rounded jambs, and we're using bendable plywood. But we took the actual door itself and then put a spacer around the edge of the door that is the space between the jamb and the door. And then we built some little L-shaped brackets that go down and screw to the core of the door that isn't covered yet. And then we'll just take all those, so they stick up from the door, and there's about 20 of them that go around. Then we'll take our bendable plywood and we'll just run it right around the actual door. So it has to match. So
one thing that fascinates me is I have a hard time visualizing something when I'm working in 3-dimensional. Like, I mean, floors is one thing for me, but when maybe you can explain to me how you can see this in your mind's eye and how you can actually, you know, do the turns and everything that you need to do with a piece of wood.
So there's 2 very distinct kinds of looking at things in the world. There is what I call where you build something, and then there's reductive, where you take stuff away. So if you are a sculptor and you want to sculpt a swan out of a big, huge block of ice, you take this big block of ice and you take away everything that isn't swan, right? So
yeah.
take away everything you don't want. So therefore, when you start sculpting it, the very first thing you're going to start to see is the beak, you know, and if it's got his, you know, head extended, you know, so you can see the head. So you have to do that first, okay? If you're doing what I call building something, you start with the body and you start applying all the things to it to get to where you want to be. And those are two totally different mindsets. And all people fall into, at least in my observation, all people fall into one of those two categories. And for me, as a furniture builder and a construction guy and a guy who's building, you know, a bar or back bar, you start off and you just start adding everything on to get what you want on the outside. When I started doing some wood turning and everything, I had a really hard time adjusting my thought to the fact that I had taken this block of wood and I want to get a bowl out of it. I'm supposed to take everything that isn't bowl. I'm really good at, since the modern age has come along in my lifetime, where we have computers and computer graphics and computer drawing and CNC, you know, computer aided design, those kinds of things. You can take and you can design something in a computer, and then you can take your fancy little mouse and you can rotate that object and look at it from different angles and everything. I'm really blessed with the ability. I can do that in my head because I can't do it on the computer because I can't see the screen. So,
well, Wayne and I can see the screen, and we still can't do it on the computer.
Yeah, so George, what I'm curious to know is how you're able to measure. Obviously, when you're measuring something and we use a tape measure, you don't have that objective. You were mentioning something about putting our hands up like
right.
this.
So here's my hand next to your hand.
Yeah.
And in the Bible it says that that Noah used cubics to build the ark. So a cubic is from the tip of your elbow to the tip of your finger.
Okay.
Well, if you build one side of the ark and I build the other side of the ark, we are not going to
have a problem.
We're going to have a crescent shape. It's only going to go in a circle.
Okay.
So someone invented a universal method that everybody could measure with, a ruler with numbers. And if you've ever been around the furniture business for a long time, you'll know that there's things as story sticks.
Mm-hmm.
And a story stick will tell you exactly how to build a piece of furniture, and it has all the markings on it. So it's a ruler of sorts. Okay. Yes. But we have progressed to modern day rulers. Yes. And my modern day ruler is this device here. It's a piece of threaded rod. Okay. 16 threads to the inch, standard thread rod, and it's inside a round tube, so it'll slide in and out of the round tube.
And each one of those notches is a 16th
Each
of an
one
inch.
is a 16th, and then right there's a little spring-loaded ball bearing that goes against the side of that rod that's mounted there. So if I want to measure something that is 1 3/16 long, these are at at half-inch increments. So there's a half, there's 1 inch, and then there's 1/16, 2/16, 3/16. So from here to there, I have 1 3/16. So I can be real accurate from that. And one of the things that I tell people all the time is human hands, fingers, whatever, you pretty easily feel a human hair, thickness of a human hair. And that's, somewhere around, it's less than 128th of an inch. It's really small.
Yeah.
And I think 4,000 to be precise.
Okay.
And you can, lots of times you can't see that. Okay, but if you run your hand, everybody knows if you run your hand across the surface of a laminated top or a glass top or the bathroom vanity, you always know that you always feel the hair that's on the counter or whatever. So your fingers are real accurate. So if you learn to change a little bit of your mindset from looking at things, reading the tape measure and using your fingers instead of your eyes, or your fingers as your eyes. Okay. Then you can be really, really accurate.
Hey, George, how long have you been doing woodworking?
I've been at it about 50 years, roughly. My grandfather was a woodworker. My mother actually was a really good woodworker. So when I was a young kid, whenever any woodworking needed to get done, Mom, grabbed the hammer and the saw and started in at it. And then when I was a young kid, we lived on the edge of a farm, and then as things go on farms, there's always something that needs to be done, and there's always a shortage of people to do things. So, starting as a young kid, I baled hay and milked cows and and shoveled manure and all of those kinds of things, just like all the rest of my cousins did. And then I got interested in, you know, motors and fixing balers and stock cars and motorcycles and all those kinds of things. Although I couldn't drive them, I certainly could make them go fast. Uh, and then I got involved in bicycles and worked at a bicycle shop for quite a few years. The first 2 years of my woodworking adventure, my shop was in the basement of a commercial office building. And my deal with the guy who owned the office building is I couldn't make noise during the daytime. So from 10 o'clock in the morning until 4 o'clock in the afternoon for 2 years, I worked at the bicycle shop, fixing bicycles. And then at 5 o'clock, I would show up at my building, and I paid my rent on my building by being the janitor. So I would clean the bathrooms, vacuum the halls, wash all the windows, take out the trash and all those kinds of fun things, shovel the snow in the wintertime and all that. So that's how I paid my rent for the first 2 years of my woodworking business. And then finally got enough money, I had bought my own building and moved into that and went back to working. Um, Still working, 16-hour days, just that all the day was mine instead of somebody else.
So you had to still, I mean, to be a woodworker, you had to be using routers, table saws, stuff like that. How'd you pull that off being blind?
Yeah, I mean, if you really stop and think about it, if you stop and think about a table saw, that's the best example to look at. Is that really there's a saw blade on a table saw. It spins, but it's really static. It can't go anywhere. It unless you pick up the whole saw and move it somewhere. That's the only way that it can move. The only moving components on a table saw is you. Okay, so if you set your table saw up and you take your fancy little click rule and you set the distance between the fence and your saw blade, and you set it at 1.25 inches, and you say, how wide's my thumb? And I say, my thumb won't go between that saw blade and that fence. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use a push stick. But if you set it at 2.5 inches, you can say, oh, if my hand's over against the fence, I can run my hand through there all day long, and no problem whatsoever. So, and it's you that's doing the moving, So unless you have some catastrophic event where the saw decides it's going to launch your piece of wood like a missile, which happens every once in a while, it's a pretty safe thing to do. It's the same as running, if you run stuff across the shaper, you pick up a piece of wood, you slide it against the fence, you slide it along, it runs against the cutter. If you're cutting stiles and rails, they're 2.5 inches wide. If you keep your fingers on less than halfway across the board, you're perfectly safe. If they're smaller than that, then you better find another way to run them. If you're doing raised panels, you've got a great big huge panel, so you'd be a long ways away from the cutter. And if you were a sensible woodworker and you're running raised panels, you run the cutter underneath so that number one, you can get better chip pickup that way if you got good vacuum on your equipment. And the other thing is you're less likely, I say, to engage your fingers in the process.
Well, Wayne's been talking an awful lot about the shop and your tools and the tiny little things that you've made. One thing I tell you, George, before Wayne leaves, I pat him down.
Okay.
I give him a pat down.
Okay, so he might run off with my 42-inch wide time saver sander.
He's a really good guy, but sometimes he's like a kid. He just can't help himself. Kids don't do it to be mean. But yeah, so Wayne is talking so much about your shop. How do you navigate a shop, a wood shop, using so many different tools?
Like I was saying to Wayne, you would think that a blind man's wood shop, everything would have its exact spot. And it's like every other wood shop I've ever been in. Well, I've actually been in a couple that that are just amazing, that people have way more time to spend work. They must not do anything but work on their shop, you know. But you know, I have general vicinities that I put things in. You know, I have a big tool bench that, you know, the tools and everything go on, and things roughly get back to the same spot. I mean, the shelf that's designated for sanding tools has sanding equipment. You know, the shop, the spot that's designated for nailers. You know, I do segregate them out for, you know, quarter crown, you know, crown staplers and straight nailers, and, you know, and those kinds of things. Framing nailers, I do, and I keep my flooring nailer in a very special spot, someplace where I don't have to use it very often.
Um, George, I don't know if Wayne has told you this, but last year he won Floor of the Year.
That's what he was saying.
Oh, okay. Well, I assumed he would have told you that.
Yeah.
He's a little bit of a perfectionist, so he actually cue the music. You can hear the music now of the Floor of the Year music that we play for Wayne every time. But Wayne's quite the perfectionist. Are you a perfectionist also?
I've been accused of being rather anal about what I do. I will tell you that there are many projects in this world that I'm absolutely sure I spent more time after they were built doing the final detailing and sanding and preparation for finish than I probably did spend building the piece. You know. Excuse me, Wayne. I'm going to reach over here. I'm going to grab this. So I'm going to show you something here that has probably 50 hours in it, and it's just a log. And but Wayne will attest for the fact if you pet this thing, it is absolutely like petting satin. And this doesn't even have any finish on it. That's just sanding. It is glass.
That's just sanding.
That's just
Can I
sanding.
turn it towards the
Absolutely.
camera a little bit?
Oh yeah, yeah. So this is an art show that opens June 1st here in town, and this is one of the pieces, the abstract and kind of organic pieces that I'm going to put in the show.
What did you sand that to?
2000.
Oh my God.
But I mean, it's an incredibly interesting piece of wood, and you know, how do you bring its beauty out for people to, you know, to enjoy? And one of the things I do like spending a lot of time making them feel really wonderful. And that piece there, especially the textures and the difference between the places where there is still bark on it and then the pieces that have been polished out to the max is the sensation of touching it is an experience into itself.
Most of our listeners are wood floor installers. Let's hear the story about some of your wood floors that you've done.
I guess the biggest wood floor I've ever put down myself was a white oak floor that was 4,500 square feet. It did take me a couple days. That's a lot of floor. It just seems like it takes forever. There's in this building here, there's a little bit of yellow pine floor, and eventually there's going to be, in my gallery space, there'll be about 1,500 square feet, 1,800 square feet of more of yellow pine flooring. But you know, I was in the contracting business and the millwork business, so we've, you know, put down some of that ugly plastic laminate, you know, snap together stuff. I've put down some pretty cool herringbone designs. I did some restoration work in an old church where it was a round church, and then the sanctuary area of the church was round as well. And it was a smaller round inside the great big round pushed off to one side. So along the back side of that round, there was a hallway, and off the back side of that hallway was a whole bunch of classrooms and different things. And all of this flooring in every one of those rooms sunbursted out from the center of the doorway into the corners of the weird pie-shaped rooms. And there was a fire in the building, and we worked in some of the areas where water damaged and some areas that were fire damaged and everything. And it was quite the experience, because, knowing that, the church was built in the 1880s, 1890s, and that the guys that did those did it 100% with hand tools, so they made each one of those pie-shaped pieces, and machined the groove and and the tongue on them with hand planes, and it was all hard maple. I mean, I just can't imagine how much time they spent sharpening tools, because that's the only way you can do a good job. I went to a Japanese demo one time. George Takamutsu, I think that's how he's out in Pennsylvania. I think I said his name right. And he had some Japanese master woodworkers in from Japan demonstrating some Japanese joinery. And they had this old master guy. He would make about 3 or 4 passes with the hand plane, and he would hand it to the apprentice guy, and he'd go take it and sharpen it and hand him another plane at the same time. He'd make 3 or 4 passes with that one and hand it back, and he was probably in his late 70s, right? And the apprentice guy was in his 50s, the guy that was still sharpening tools.
When you get him line.
When the guy dies, that's all you get to move up. Yeah.
So there's still hope for you, Wayne. You could be a sharpener. You
Rob,
could be the sharpen guy. I would like to ask you about the triangular boxes that you make for the American flag for veterans and first responders, police, and everything for their funeral flag.
Okay, I started making those when I was in Hickory, North Carolina. I moved from northern Michigan. I ran my millwork shop in Traverse City, Michigan for 9 years. I just built onto my building and built a big fancy new finishing room. And then the economy in 1983 just stopped. Interest rates went to 20%. I just built onto my building. I lost the whole mess. I went broke and had to start over again. So I went to North Carolina, went to Catawba Valley College for a degree in furniture production management. And so after I'd been working in the furniture business down there for a while, as all really good ideas and really good things do, your mom humbles you into doing things. So my mom had a place in Florida, and she's from northern Michigan. So every year she would make her pilgrimage from northern Michigan to Florida, and then from Florida back to northern Michigan. So she stopped to see her favorite son. My brother says I am anyways. And and my father's internment flag was laying on my coffee table when she stopped, and she says, "I can't believe it. You've been in the woodworking business your whole life, and you haven't made a nice box to put your father's flag in." Only has how a mother can say that, to make you feel like you are not quite a quarter of an inch tall, So the dutiful son that I am, the next morning I get up bright and early and I go out to my shop in the garage, and I make this pretty little triangular box to put my father's internment flag in, and I bring it in and I show it to her. She goes, "Oh my God, that's beautiful. You're such a good boy." And I thought, I made mom happy. My life is complete. So the very next day, 2 friends of mine stop and come walking in my house, and the one guy looks over and he says, "Is that a box for a veteran's internment flag?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "My brother owns a funeral home over in Morganton, and he says he just asked me last week if he knew someone that could make some boxes, presentation boxes for flags. They had some 2 brothers from Morganton who had been in Vietnam, who were both killed at the same time, and remains had been missing. They'd found them, and they were coming back home, and they were going to have a funeral and everything for them, and they wanted boxes, for display boxes for the flags." So he said, "Can you make some more?" And I said, "Well, absolutely." So he says, "Well, let's go show them to my brother or brother-in-law, one or the other." So we jump in the car and go up there, and we walk in the door, and the guy says, "That's what I want right there." He says, "I need 6 of them." And I said, "Okay." And I said, "Do you say how much there?" And he says, "It doesn't matter." He said, there's a good customer.
This is a good business.
Yeah, it's a great business. So I went and made him his boxes that he needed, and I made some extra ones, and And then I started doing a little bit of research and looking at the Veterans Administration. And in the next, 10 or 15 years, this was in the mid 1980s, there was going to be 1 million vets that were going to pass away because that's the age they were, And so I said, this is a viable business. So I had a friend who was a photographer who owed me money. I had done some work for him, and he hadn't quite paid it all off yet. So I went to him. I said, "Will you do some photography for me?" And he did. So then I went to the local printer, and I walked in. I says, "I really don't have any money. Do you need any woodworking done? I need these brochures printed." So I actually swapped the printing of my brochures for some woodworking. And then I just started mailing out to the funeral homes. I picked up a copy of the National Funeral Home magazine and just started, figuring out who was where and what. And then I started going to the National Funeral Directors shows where they have their trade shows every year, and set up my booth and started selling them. And as luck would have it, I landed a contract with the U.S. Army and with the Air Force. I didn't have enough money to produce the product. I mean, as all of you know, being in business and everything, that cash is king. You can have all the business in the world that you want and even have a decent profit, but if you don't have cash flow, you can't make it happen. And I didn't have any cash. So I was looking for an investor, and found a guy who was really, really excited about everything. Came right down to the last day that we were going to finalize the whole thing, and he comes in the meeting and says, "No, I decided I want to invest in your company. I don't want to invest." And my heart just stopped. He says, "I'll buy it from you. How much you want for it?" And he's like, really put me on the spot. "How much you want for it?" He right now he wants an answer. So I just threw this stupid figure out on the counter. And he said, "Okay, we can do that." And I sold.
Oh, damn.
I owned my flag case business for 3 years and 3 days. And when I sold it to him, I had 2,500 accounts coast to coast. So, I mean, the guy bought, and now it's sold over. It's been quite a few years ago. He announced he sold his millionth flag case.
Wow.
I did get royalty. I did happen to have a copyright on the design, a design copyright on it. So I did get royalties. My problem was I should have asked for a smaller royalty for a longer period of time, because I got a nice royalty for a short period of time.
The boxes that you made, did you put you sign them or put something on there that we could tell it was you?
Well, they would have GM Wurtzel on them, on the original ones, and then they say Elk Products on it is what they said afterwards.
Okay.
Mine had a casting on the front that was either an Army, Navy, or Marine insignia, and then a metal plate.
Because we have one for my brother-in-law's. I want to see if maybe it was one of yours.
What year? I mean, that would tell you.
He died in 89.
Boy, it might be. I mean, that's right when I was doing it.
That's what I was thinking. It might be.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got one.
I have the very first one that was ever made.
Wow.
And it has suffered dramatically. It went from sunny Florida and 90% humidity into storage in northern Michigan in the middle of the winter, and it did not fare well. But there's what they looked like originally. Is that?
Yep.
And this casting up here could have been Army or Navy or Marines or the Great Seal, which is what this one is.
Very cool. That's the very first one.
This is the very first one. So I built something, a 1/3 scale model of a Steinway D grand piano for Stevie Wonder. And I happened to be fortunate enough that he went to my high school, so I've known him for a long time. And when they were looking for someone to do a outstanding achievement award from the state of Michigan, they contracted me to build this 1/3 scale model of the Steinway D grand piano for him. And I ran into Stevie about 5 years ago at a function in California. And we were talking, and I was so impressed that he remembered who I was, because I was a little kid when he was at school. He was like 3 years older than me. Wow. And then he remembered, that I had made the thing for And he said it's still in his penthouse in New York City. So that made me feel good that it didn't get relegated to the trash heap somewhere.
That's awesome.
I was telling him that, he really gives blind people a bad name because everybody thinks blind people should be able to sing, I can't carry a tune in a pickup truck. I mean, it just can't be done.
Or what's the name? Ronnie Millsap.
Ronnie
right
Millsap.
across the hill there.
Yeah.
Another great singer.
Ronnie, I think I saw Ronnie's very last concert. He did a concert just 9 months ago over in Bristol at the Paramount over there in Bristol. And I think that was the last concert that he was having troubles. It was really sad. And I'm so glad I went because I've bumped into Ronnie a couple different times in my life and talked to him and different things. And one of my best Ronnie Millsap stories that I absolutely love is when Ronnie was first getting started in the music business. He signed up with a promoter doing what's called the Chitlin circuit, and it was North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama. You go around all the little towns, and these guys had regular routes. And Ronnie says that his only thing was it had to be wherever the Greyhound bus went, wherever the bus went. But Ronnie says, I thought I was really getting somewhere in the music business. He says, all of a sudden people would start asking for me to come back. I thought they love my music. And Ronnie can't stand playing an out-of-tune piano. So he always carried his piano tuning stuff with him. So he says, he was in one of these little bars one time and he came in and they go, the piano tuner's here. Not the singer's here, but the piano tuner's here. And Ronnie says, I figured out that they really didn't care a whole lot about my singing. They wanted their piano tuned cheap.
That's a great story.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your documentary, Marie's Journey.
Marie's Journey was I tell you, if you watch that, you better buy a box of Kleenexes because it will make you cry. Keith Famey, the guy who put that whole film together and everything, he's a long-term friend of mine, and we had done a documentary film in Michigan, all about blind people in Michigan and all the different jobs and everything that blind people had and everything. So when he got involved with doing Mary's Journey, one of the things that her favorite book was a book called Paddle to the Sea. And Paddle to the Sea was a kid's book that was written in the 1940s, mid 1940s. And it's a story about a little American Indian boy who lives up on the north shore of Lake Superior. And he carves a little wooden canoe with a little wooden Indian in it, and he takes it down and he places it on the snow on the edge of the stream in the spring of the year, and he writes on the bottom of the little canoe, it says, "My name is Paddle. Please help me. I want to get to the sea." Because anybody who grew up on the Great Lakes knows that no matter which Great Lake you're in, if you go downstream from wherever you are, you end up going out the St. Lawrence Seaway and you end up in the ocean. So the story is the journey of the little boat making its way from Lake Superior all the way out through all the Great Lakes out to the ocean. And that was Mary's favorite book when she was growing up. She loved that book. And it was on her bucket list to do as an adult. And when she figured out that she was only going to live, a relatively short period of time, her cancer was going to kill her. She knew that. She asked Keith Famey, she says, "Can you build a boat to put my ashes in so that it can make the journey that Paddle made?" And he goes, "Yeah, and I know just the guy to build the boat." So Keith calls me up and says, "You want to build a sailboat?" And I said, "I never built a sailboat before." "But sure, I'll build you a sailboat. What's it have to do?" And he says, "Well, it's got to go from Lake Michigan out to the Atlantic Ocean." I said, "Piece of cake. As long as it doesn't go over Niagara Falls, we're all set." Just in case you want to know, if you send a little boat over Niagara Falls, it's going to cost you $10,000. So don't do it. The little boat's patterned after a laser sailboat, which I used to sail when I was a kid. I grew up on Lake Michigan and small lakes in northern Michigan, and I used to sail all the time and sailed a lot of lasers and a lot of lightning sailboats, and so that was the design that was in my head. So, And I was really happy. The very, very first time we ever put it in the water, I was figuring I was going to have to go, move some weights around in it, adjust some ballast, and that hit sailed perfect. I was so happy. And we took some artistic license with the design a little bit. Instead of putting a short, rather deep keel on it, put a really long keel on it, so you really did encourage it to sail straight. So because when you have a regular sailboat and you want to sail it around, you want to make it easy to steer. And I figured we didn't want it. We wanted this thing to just go, and it was really cool. You put it on a reach and it would go down until it ran out, and it'd jibe, and the sail would go to the other side, and it would go on another reach. It'd run downwind. I mean, like really well. Once we figured out what length to make the traveler on the sail, and it made the journey. But if you watch the movie, you can see it's with a lot of help from a lot of friends, trains, planes, and automobiles. It rode on some motorcycles. It rode on some other people's boats. It made a little ride on a train. It made a ride in a little airplane. But it made it all the way to the Atlantic Ocean, and they dumped her ashes in the Atlantic Ocean. It's really cool. It's a great story.
Where could they find that? Is that on like Netflix or something?
It's on the Vidya, the pay-per-view video service. Vidya, I think is how you say it.
Okay.
And so it's pretty easy to find. If you Google it, it pops up.
Okay, there's a quote that you have that I really like, and so I don't know if you're going to say this or not, Rob, but so anyone will not get it in there. Never allow someone who doesn't have to pay the consequences dictate the consequences of your life.
That's right.
I think that's a great quote.
And don't ever take advice from somebody who has no stake in the game.
Mhm.
If someone tells you, and this has a lot to do with people with disabilities of all kinds. You will get do-gooder people who think that they know more about you and what is good for you than you yourself may know. And if I ask somebody to give me advice on what they think I should do for a profession, I would think that there's very few normally sighted, well-meaning people who would think that I ought to go out and become a carpenter. I mean, that just isn't one of the things that they would suggest that I do. But it has served me really, really well. And I try to tell people, all the young blind people all the time, or disabled people all the time, is find what your passion is and follow your passion. Don't let someone else dictate to you, based on what their perception of your skills and talents are.
Yeah, that's great advice in all cases in life. And so like I said, when I came across your name, I thought this is and then I saw your woodworking pieces, and I told you I'm bringing my wife back
Oh, good.
because she makes
Did
all
she got a charge card?
yeah, she does.
Oh, good. Yeah, there we go.
She makes all the decisions in our house on what we buy. I'm just there. And we'll put a link to your website so other people can see your.
2 years ago, when COVID came along, we were, Sharon, who isn't here today, but we were sitting around here trying to figure out what we're going to do. We hadn't seen a single soul in our little gallery in 2 months. Not one single person stuck their head in the door in 2 months. Sharon's been an antique dealer for most of the second half of her adult life. Anyway, she started off in the music business, but she says, I have this old wooden business. We live in the South now. Maybe we should make these because everybody makes biscuits. So she went and dug it out of the box and handed it to me and says, can you make one of these? And I took a look at it and said, I can make one of those. And I went downstairs and I knocked one out, brought it up. She says, oh my God, that's so much prettier than the one that we used for the model. So we put it up on the Facebook page. And within like 3 days, 30 people wanted one. And I thought, that's really cool. That was quick and easy, And then I made the 30, and we lined them all up on a little set of bleachers and took another picture of all of these, and we said, okay, they're all ready to go. We'll start shipping them out. Blah, blah. Someone took that picture and posted it on the White Lily flower page. That picture. So by the end of the next week, we had another 50 sold. So I was in the biscuit cutter. I never considered myself a production wood burner. I am now.
You found your niche.
I did, you know, and
Again.
it's made over 1,000 of them.
Wow.
You know?
Wow. Well, the ice cream scoopers are.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
we've made a lot of those.
holy smoke, Rob!
Yeah.
I'm gonna. Rob, I'll tell you what. I'll get you one because I'm getting one for myself. You won't believe how heavy this is and how it's immaculate. So, good stuff.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it.
I have another project that is, I haven't got the contract finished up for it, but we're going to build some reproductions of Helen Keller's desk that she used to use. The sad story of that is I don't have her desk because her house burned down in 1947 and it was lost. But as things will go, you know, sometimes even a blind squirrel finds an acorn now and then. And we had a picture of Helen's desk, and we took it to the big arts and crafts show down at the Grove Park Inn that they have every year, the big arts and crafts show. And we started showing the picture around, and we said, you know, who made this, who made this, who made this, and you know, guys start digging through catalogs and start looking at it, and they decided it was an L and J.G. Stickley piece. And so then we went downstairs, and as luck would have it, we start looking around at the show, and lo and behold, here is the L and J.G. Stickley library desk table that exactly like Helen Keller sitting at. I mean, guys, we called the guys back that we talked to earlier that had been looking at the picture. They came down with catalogs, you know, magnifying glasses and measuring tapes, and we sat down and pulling the drawers out and looking at the hardware and comparing this and comparing. And we're pretty sure we have the exact same model of the desk that Helen Keller has in the photo. So we're doing reproductions of that, and we were hoping to get it. I was hoping to get the whole thing up off the ground yet this summer, but it looks like it's going to be by fall when it starts going. But I'm really excited about that project. Want to build 100 of them. That's the goal. And if you've ever looked at Stickley pieces, they're kind of pricey. They're quarter saw and oak stuff. So they'll sell for about $5,000 each. Wow. Yeah. And then part of the proceeds, all of the proceeds from it will go back to the American Foundation for the Blind to money back into a fund for people that want to do non-traditional craft kinds of things rather than going to college. People who want to be a potter or a gardener or a woodworker or a weaver or whatever. We want to get some money back in there so people can pursue the things they want to pursue.
Very cool. So we're going to wrap up. We didn't get to everything we didn't even get to your skiing trip, 500 miles across Finland.
Norway, Finland, and Sweden.
Really?
Yeah. Started off on the Kola Peninsula in Russia, skied all the way across Norway, Finland, and Sweden through an area that is called Lapland. It's where the Sami people live. We were part of the trip was above the Arctic Circle. The coldest day was only 57 below zero. The warmest day was the last day of the trip. It hit 36.
Just to keep you coming back for more.
George, is there anything that we didn't touch on that you would like to touch on, or something we missed, or that you'd like to leave with everybody before we go?
Yeah, actually, if we could put something in there, you know, as you know, there are people out there in the world who are, you know, faced with, you know, macular degeneration or some eye degenerative disease through that or through diabetes, which is the biggest cause of blindness there is. And so many people I've met in my life who, you know, think because they're losing their vision that they're no longer going to be able to pursue their passion, their favorite pastime or whatever. And I teach people who've become newly blind. I actually teach sighted people even who want to learn how to be woodworkers. And so if you have people who are interested in wanting to learn or people all the time, if you spent, 30 years, 40 years as a woodworker, and now you've become blind, it's easy to teach you to do something as a blind person. It's really hard to inject 30 or 40 years of knowledge into someone's head.
So true.
All that stuff you have in there is still in there. You just need a way to measure. And if I can show you how to measure, you can get right back at building that stuff.
That's, I have an aunt who is just now having issues with her eyes, and she's losing her sight, and,
Yep.
and it's scary to her and what
Yep.
have you. So I will 100% have her listen to the podcast.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's just been fantastic talking to you. I enjoyed it thoroughly. You got to see the commercial because you'll laugh so hard when you see the commercial.
You know you've done something right in the movie business, or if someone makes a parody of whatever you've done. There is a parody of the Subaru ad. You need to Google.
Yes, the parody is hysterical.
It is. It's fantastic.
It is awesome. Yes, the commercial was great, but the parody is hilarious.
It is fantastic. I laughed so hard. I laughed so hard. Yep.
Well, we usually end the podcast to say this has been another episode, and this has, but really it's been an honor to talk to George today, and I learned something every day. And coming down and seeing his shop, like I said, I've got to bring my wife back because there's some stuff there I damn sure want to pick up. And we'll link to his work and his Facebook information, and give it a look. You want to see the really cool woodworking pieces, 50 years of experience behind all this stuff, beautifully finished. So there you go. Check it out. And this has been another episode of On the Floor with Wayne and Rob. Please stay tuned for another episode.